The wind moved like a living spirit across the tall grasses, binding them in silver waves beneath the early sun. Uruk crouched low, fingers brushing the earth, studying the faint imprint of hooves pressed into the soil. The herd had passed recently. He could feel it, the warmth still lingering in the tracks, the faint scent carried on the breeze. For as long as anyone in his band could remember, life had followed this rhythm. Move in the herds move. Gutter in berries reaping, fish in rivers swirl. The world was wide, and they belonged to it, not tied to any one place, but connected to all of it. They had once come from lands far south, stories whispered of ancient ancestors walking out of East Africa generations beyond memory. Since then, humans had spread across as forests, deserts, and frozen plains as distant as Siberia. Survival depended on knowledge of seasons, stars, and animal behavior. But this year was different. The rains had come late. The gazelle herd was smaller. Edible roots were scarce. Children cried more often at night. One evening, after a thin meal of roasted lizard and wild figs, Aru's sister-in-law wandered toward a bend in the river valley where they had camped seasons before. The valley curved like a crescent moon, fertile, green, unusually generous compared to the dry grasslands beyond. This land would one day be known as Mesopotamia, but to them it was simply the place where the river split and rejoined each other. Nala knelt in the dirt and ran her fingers through a patch of thick wild grain. As she remembered how, months earlier, seeds had spilled from oven baskets during food preparation. Now, in that very spot, the stalks grew taller and denser than elsewhere. It was a small observation, almost meaningless, yet it lingered in her mind. When the band prepared to leave again, she hesitated. What if we stayed? She asked quietly. The elders resisted. Staying meant risk. If animals did not return, they would starve. Movement was safety. Movement was tradition. But hunger was stronger than tradition. They stayed. At first, it felt unnatural. Days that once held long hunts now filled with clearing brush and scratching lines into the soil with sharpened sticks. Nala pressed seeds into the ground deliberately, not by accident. Aro watched skeptically. Waiting felt passive, almost helpless, compared to the certainty of a spear and a chase. Weeks passed. Nothing. 10 green shoots pierced the soil in neat, intentional rows. Children guarded the fragile plants from birds. Adults hauled water from the nearby rivers, the great arteries later called the Tigris River and Euphrates River, carrying it in clay-lined baskets to moisten the fields. When the harvest finally came, it was not enormous. But it was predictable, controllable. For the first time, food did not entirely depend on luck. They built simple storage pits lined with stone. They shaped mud into bricks and stacked them into low walls to shield grain from wind and scavengers. Fires burned in fixed hearts instead of temporary rings of stone. Aro felt something shift inside him, something both comforting and unsettling. The horizon no longer called to him in the same way. The world was shrinking, concentrating around this river bend. Yet change carried consequences. Clearing land demanded exhausting labor. Backs ached from bending. Hands blistered from grinding grain into floor. And when strangers appeared one evening at the edge of the valley, eyeing the stored harvest, tension flared instantly. Before farming, food had been gathered and consumed quickly. Now it could be taken. Ownership had been born. As the sun set behind the reeds, Aro climbed a small rise overlooking the fields. Smoke drifted from new huts built close together. Later mixed with argument. Children chased each other between stacked baskets of grain. They were no longer wanderers passing lightly over the earth. They were planting themselves into it. The seeds beneath the soil were growing. And so was something far more powerful, the beginning of civilization. Years passed, and the small riverside camp no longer resembled the fragile settlement Aro once knew. Mud brick homes stood shoulder to shoulder, their flat roofs baking beneath the sun. Narrow pathways wound between storage rooms packed with grain. What had begun as an experiment in survival had grown into permanence. Tark, Arus grandson, woke before dawn to the sound of grinding stone. His mother crushed barley into flour while his father inspected irrigation channels that fed their fields. Water from the twin rivers, the Tigris River and Euphrates River, no longer flowed freely. It was directed, controlled, forced through hand-dug canals that stretched like veins across the land. Ancient days were spent maintaining these channels. If a wall broke, crops failed. If water was herded upstream, conflict followed. The settlement now resembled the early city-states rising across Mesopotamia. Traders arrived with obsidian from distant hills and copper from lands as far as Anatolia. In exchange, they carried sacks of grain and woven textiles. For the first time, the village was connected to places beyond the horizon, not by wandering, but by commerce. At the center of the settlement stood a towering mud structure, a temple platform dedicated to ancient goddess believed to command floods and drought. Priestess claimed they could interpret divine will. Offerings of grain were stacked at the temple entrance. The more food the farmers produced, the more power the temple held. Tark was fascinated not by farming, but by the symbols pressed into wet clay tablets inside the temple storehouse. He watched a script carefully carved markings that represented numbers, harvest totals, and names. Writing was not yet poetry or philosophy, it was record-keeping. Grain in, grain out, labor avet, dictus unpaid. We must count everything. Tark honest asked, because surplus brings responsibility, the script replied. And responsibility requires memory, but surplus also brought inequality. Some families controlled larger fields. Some had more livestock. Those who owned little often worked the land of others, offering labor in exchange for protection or grain. Social layers farmed, farmers, craftsmen, priests, leaders. Freedom felt different now than it had in the stories of wandering ancestors. This is, though, become part of daily life. Living close together, humans and domesticated animals sharing space allowed sicknesses to spread quickly. Fevers swept through the settlement in waves. In the old nomadic days, bands could move away from illness. Now they inherit it. One year, the river flooded unpredictably, destroying lower fields. Farmers demanded assistance from temple leaders who controlled grain reserves. When help was slow to arrive, anger simmered. Tark witnessed heated arguments in the marketplace, not over survival in the wildernesses, but over taxes and fairnesses. And beyond the settlement walls, rival communities competed for fertile land. Skirmishes erupted along irrigation boundaries. Wooden spears became bronze-tipped weapons. Organized warfare, honest rare and spontaneous, began to take shape. Yet progress was undeniable. Potters perfected kiln-fired ceramics. Metalworkers shaped stronger towels. Trade networks expanded toward the lush banks of the Nile River and beyond. Word spread of larger cities rising, places like Uruk, where thousands lived behind protective walls. Tark eventually apprenticed as a scribe. While his father bent over fields, Tark bent over clay. He recorded harvest yields, temple offerings, and labor contributions for canal repairs. Through numbers and symbols, he saw patterns, drought cycles, surplus growth, population increase. He began to understand something profound. Agriculture was not just about food. It was about control, of nature, of labor, of information. One evening, standing atop the temple platform, Tark looked over endless fields shimmering in golden light. Irrigation canals glinted like threads of silver. Smoke rose from hundreds of homes. The settlement posed with order and hierarchy. In his grandfather's time, survival depended on following herds across open land. In his time, survival depended on cooperation, organization, and power. Humanity had traded movement for roots. And those roots were growing deeper than anyone could have imagined.